There's another event that you do that's an annual silver tea, and we're sitting here actually with a tea set in our background, so I think it's pretty appropriate.
Well, it's a silver tea. And we try to have it where our docents are there, and we serve the tea from silver teapots. We have large silver teapots, and tea was very. That's what the women. Sarah would have had her friends over for tea, and some of them had to bring their own cups. But here, of course, and in July when we have it, it's a woman's. Basically, men can come, but it's usually a one-woman show for people that are deceased, but they're well known for something historic and important in the life of this country.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then just from a historic perspective, the fact that, were there other types of tea sets besides silver tea sets, or was that pretty much only because that it takes place at that particular time?
We used to have a lilac tea in March. Our docents put that on, and it was called lilac because it was usually around lilac time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And of course you get the homemade foods, and you get the teas, because again, tea was what they drank at that time. And the docents, and even at our silver tea, we make all the refreshments. Mm-hmm. We make the sandwiches, and we make all the desserts.
And you say we being whom?
Members of the society, the board members, the docents, and volunteers.
So really anybody who just likes to cook and isn't necessarily a member or volunteering or even a donator to the society could come and help for that particular event or some of your other events.
Yes, they can. They can volunteer and help us out. We welcome anybody that would like to become a member or just come down and give us a hand.
Absolutely. Okay, that's terrific. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Elaine.
Thank you.
Well, now we're back with Julia. Thanks for joining us again.
Oh, no problem.
So we were just talking a little bit about the financial situation or the donation programs that are involved. Maybe we could elaborate on that a little bit and kind of tell people how people can help out the Historical Society, because the fact is, as much as you're doing, there's certainly more you could be done and support that you could use, currently.
Absolutely. Well, like a lot of museums or art galleries, we do have a membership base, and so people can become yearly members. The fee is only $30. And what kind of is included in that is you get a newsletter to the Historical Society that has articles and information about our collections. You'll get invited to special events, member openings, or discounts on programs. And then we also have lifetime memberships, which is about $150. And our memberships really help keep the programs for the Historical Society going. People don't really realize how much cost goes into even preserving our collection items, keeping the room at a certain temperature, keeping the humidity down. We need space to store people's, objects, because these are family heirlooms. These are things that people have really entrusted the Historical Society to protect and preserve. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that. And so donations to the Historical Society help that. We also have fundraising events throughout the year, like the Silver Tea or the annual appeal reception, where we ask for extra donations to help keep the programs up and running. And then if, people just want to send us a check in the mail, we would be happy to accept your check. I'll even send you a handwritten letter personally to thank you very much for your donation. So
that's terrific. And I guess we should point out it's a nonprofit, it's a 501c3 organization, which I believe means that some of the donation that they make is actually tax deductible. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to write us a check for $50, $100, we would send you back a letter that you could use for tax purposes, and 100% of your donation would go. You could write that off as a tax donation. Yep.
Interesting. Did not know that. And then you talked about preserving some of the artifacts you get. It's my understanding, I believe you even got some things from Vermont. Is that correct?
Yeah, we actually, because of the significance of the Lower Valley's industrial heritage, and really just because people have come to New England and their families have, spread out all over the United States, we get requests for information and donations from people as far as California. We recently have been conversing with a family up in Vermont who's donated some Valley relevant artifacts. So really, we're a small local regional historical society, but our reach and our relevance is felt all over the United States.
That's amazing, and one nice thing, just so you know, is one of the plans for this show is to actually be shown, on the internet outside of the local area. So perhaps, some things. I mean, it would be an incredible thing if somebody happened to, see this conversation on a show, knew of a historical artifact, and then sent it to you. I think that would be really nice. The other thing is whether or not does the Historical Society itself kind of look outside their current collection. For instance, do you have volunteers or people who work here that perhaps, on a regular basis check eBay, check Craigslist, check the internet, just Google a certain artifact? Do you guys actually get into that, sort of using current technology to find historic pieces?
eBay is a phenomenal tool because that's really where you're going to find a lot of maybe old postcards or maybe some Derby silver, artifacts that are really relevant that, during the migration period in the 1800s when families in Connecticut are leaving and going west, they've taken those early settlement family treasures with them. And, not everybody has the space or the knowledge to understand what they have up in their attic. And so that's one of the things that we do. We sometimes get pictures emailed to us, and they want us to identify objects that they have that's stamped underneath Shelton, Derby, Ansonia.
I mean, it's a lot like when people who collect baseball cards or things like that, where they all of a sudden they uncover something that it's a rookie card, Mickey Mantle or something like that. It's kind of the same idea, just from a historical perspective. It actually reminds me too. I went to I believe Seymour had their first They started an annual festival, kind of like Derby Day, but I believe it was something in reference to when Seymour was incorporated, things like that. And during that, I actually walked around. There were vendors there selling postcards, not just of Seymour, but of just what you're talking about, of Derby artifacts, things like that. And so I think in this area, it certainly permeates. But like you said, and like you've seen, it comes from, it doesn't have to be even Connecticut. It could be anywhere. I'm sure there are things that are, maybe even happen outside the U.S., because obviously a lot of the history here started with over in Europe, so or even continues to be with the European diversity that's here. So it makes a lot of sense.
Well, you have to realize that people living in the valley are writing letters to Europe, to their family members all over the United States. Those family members now have those letters, and so to get them back, even if people have letters that they don't want to necessarily let go of, but we can scan and have for our collections. Fills in those puzzles, those pieces of information that make history really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is terrific. It's great that you're doing that, and you guys, I like the fact that, and I'm sure even something like the Connecticut Historical Society, which you guys stay in touch with, I'm sure they appreciate the effort and the initiative you guys are doing. That's just great.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we're starting to do, we recently just received a grant from United Illuminated to develop bi-monthly rotating exhibits. So in February, we're going to have our first opening. We're in our classroom space on the second floor of the Humphreys House. On manufacturing, wartime, survival, how people lived throughout the valley. So we're very happy about that. It's nice to get our collections out of its safe storage and kind of rotate it through and show people all the different things that we have.
And I guess to that point about the manufacturing that's gone here. I mean, certainly everyone in the Derby area knows with Farrell's and things like that was going on here. But I actually just recently learned. I went to the Naugatuck Green, and they have those historical signs. And I guess, rubber, vulcanized rubber was first developed in Naugatuck. Goodyear, I think, got his start up there. Things like that. It's amazing what you just drive around, and the things that you find in this area. And the Sterling Piano Factory, which a lot of viewers, I'm sure, are familiar with. The efforts to try and restore and repair and really, rejuvenate the Sterling Opera House on Elizabeth Street in Derby. So given it, I believe it is on the National Historic Register. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And actually, to that point, what does that mean? I mean, what does that mean when something? I'm sure there's plenty of historic buildings that aren't on the register. So if something like the Sterling or another, I guess, artifact or building gets put on that, what are the advantages to that?
Well, it helps. It opens up a bit more funding for the space, but generally, how to get on the list is your building has to be architecturally significant. It needs to be culturally or socially significant, or kind of a major event has happened there. So that's how you can get on there. I mean,
Well, I think it's pretty clear why the Sterling's
Yeah.
on there, because it fits all those criteria. That's impressive. I never knew that. So, okay, so as far as the Sterling goes, like I said, there's been, my understanding it was City Hall. Things were run there as well as events. Can you speak to some of the people that perform there, if you're familiar with that, and then just kind of take us through the timeline and then where we are today with the Sterling?
Well, the Sterling Opera House opened in 1889 and ran through about the 1940s, I think maybe 45, and then after that is when it became City Hall and would be open for private functions or public functions like that. But, probably one of locally significant is a very crude version of Uncle Tom's Cabin was performed on the stage of the Sterling Opera House. And actually, Uncle Tom's Cabin is was the most widely traveled show in the United States during the late and early 1900s.
And that ties in well with the Harriet Beecher Stowe up in Hartford, correct?
Absolutely. A very crude version. It wasn't, Stowe would not have approved of the stage shows, but it's still, really relevant to local history, so.
Sure. So, and as far as performers, I mean, I'm aware, Amelia Earhart was there, Houdini, Donald O'Connor, I believe, the Barrymores, things like that. So, so that's kind of the historical perspective, which I'm sure you can appreciate. But then now, if we kind of come to the present, I know there was funding that was provided to try to resurrect, and a lot has been done improvement-wise, especially with the exterior to the building. Are you familiar? Kind of, I mean, I guess I should not just you, but is the Historical Society kind of working with the city? Because I know it's high on the city's priority list, and some of the other area councils to try to make sure that not only it gets restored, but kind of gets preserved in a sense that to be appropriate.
With, like any other piece of property in the Lower Valley, we try to monitor the situation very carefully. Our job is to preserve and educate people on how significant and important this area is. So with the Sterling Opera House, we're not directly involved, but our board members, and our staff are certainly kind of watching everything. And certainly in our research files, we like to keep, we cut out all the articles related to the Sterling Opera House. Who knows, 10, 15, 100 years from now, somebody could be writing a paper on it and talking about these events today. And so we want to make sure that we are documenting that appropriately.
That's terrific. I mean, that in a way, that points back to the whole idea of education, working with students, which you already do, but now you're not just working with current students, you're planning ahead for future students, 10, 15 years down the road or beyond.
Hi, I'm Pam Lorenzo. I'm the chair of the Valley Early Childhood Task Force. And for those of you who are wondering about kindergarten registration for the following towns will take place in January of 2012. In Ansonia, it will be at the Resource Fair at Prendergast School on January 21st from 9 to 1 p.m. We do have a snow date of January 28th. In Derby, at all of the elementary schools between the week of January 17th and January 20th. In Seymour, we will also be doing registration at all of the elementary schools from January 10th through January 12th, and also at the Seymour Public Library, January 11th through the 25th, between 5 and 7 p.m. And Shelton, we will do also at all the elementary schools, the week of January 22nd. Remember, kindergarten is the foundation for future learning. Thank you.
The other thing, getting a little bit away from the Sterling, there's obviously downtown redevelopment is going on in Derby, which is a significant, will ultimately be a significant change to the area. And I've actually come across some information that the buildings, that have since been raised to accommodate the new development, some of the pieces of the buildings or the interior of the buildings have actually been preserved. I don't know if are you aware of that, and if you are, where they are kept?
Well, we have, Connecticut has a really great preservation a lot of great preservation members in the state who really try their hardest. If we cannot save a building, they try as hard as they can to save pieces of those buildings. Sometimes they're kept, if a board member in the Preservation Alliance has a barn that they can, keep some of the pieces of the building in, then they try to do that. There isn't really a centralized storage location, but again, it's just people in the community, like they've done for hundreds of years, just getting together and trying to, save and advance the community.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned, maybe saving those things locally versus overall, because it makes me think that I wasn't aware until recently, there's a firehouse museum up in Bristol, which houses, fire hoses, hats, all different, old-time hydrants, that kind of thing. It's right next to the Carousel Museum in Bristol. And so when I came back here, I spoke to some of the firefighters in Derby about that and said, oh yeah, not only do they have some of the artifacts there, some of the hats, our Derby hats, but they also kind of have started their own little sub-museum. I believe it's at the Pawgusset Firehouse, because there are 4 firehouses in Derby, and try to preserve the history and things like that, how things, and if you think about even the technology that's used today to, with all the detectors and things like that, that might be historical artifacts compared to what's being done, hundreds of years from now. So I think it's interesting that I like the fact that the Historical Society is doing things to kind of preserve things and also promote, the current history, which is, if there is such a thing, and also the things that traditionally we would refer to as historical artifacts.
Yeah, I mean, I love this phrase, history is all around us. It's we might not realize it right now, but this conversation, everything that we see and do on a daily basis is part of history. And so our job is to really cull all that information and make sense of it for people, to explain to people why it's so relevant, why it's important to, just take care of your communities and not just destroy a level of historic houses and put up another big box store.
Well, that makes me think when you say, it takes a lot of work. I could say, obviously, you don't do it by yourself. So as far as how we've talked about lifetime members and becoming a member, but then the society itself is organized in a sort of a structural fashion. When you're the executive director, but there's also a board of directors, correct? And are there sort of, other people that are involved who to kind of make things happen or keep things moving?
Yeah, well, we have an executive board with a president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. We have an additional 21 board members who are very active and each kind of have their own little assignments. Ones who help out with volunteers, ones who help out with fundraising. And then we also, as a historical society, there are other organizations in Connecticut, like the Connecticut Humanities Council and the Connecticut League of History Organizations, who serve as kind of, advisors. They're there for support. They help with fundraising. We can actually go to them for grant money.
Wow. And I imagine those organizations have websites of their own as well. We could look.
Yep. Yeah. And they also help with training and developing best practices for museums. So it really is. It's not like museums are kind of pitted against each other. We all really have this common goal to just protect and preserve and educate people about their communities. So we all really try to work together just to make sure that happens.
That's terrific, because again, one of the things is to try to talk about what are the communities not doing unto themselves, but how you're working with even local communities, or now with the fact that you can Skype people or do things on the internet. It doesn't have to be your immediate neighbor. You could be community oriented with like Hartford, where you had worked, or other parts of the U.S. or the world. So it's really kind of opens things up as far as the relationships you can build. Feeling the excitement, which is great. But what, I guess, are there other events or other sort of fundraising and things that you do to try to get the word out?
Right now, what you can do is you can visit the Historical Society Monday through Friday from 1 to 4 p.m. You can take a tour of the house. You can peek through some of our collections. We actually have file cabinets full of old photographs that you can just peek through and look through old documents. We're also open the third Saturday of every month from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. for tours as well. So.
Okay, and you're located where?
We are on 37 Elm Street in Ansonia. And actually, our next big program that we have is our annual meeting on February 12th. from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And First Lady Dolly Madison will be visiting us.
Excellent, excellent.
She'll be talking about her role as the First Lady, her husband, the president, and life during their time period.
Okay, that sounds like fun. Is there a connection with Dolly Madison to this area, or is it more just from a general historic perspective?
Just a general historic perspective. We like to, we really love the first-person reenactors who come and really bring history alive for us. So we have some very talented board members and volunteers who, over the years, have really perfected these personas. So we recently had Abraham Lincoln come and present. Actually, he read the Gettysburg Address at our annual appeal reception, and we had Harriet Tubman come and speak to us about her life during our silver tea in the summer.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific. So, well, it sounds like you guys got a lot of great things going, and I'm sure we're going to be able to learn a lot more things that are going on, not just in the house, but certainly outside in the community that you're doing. So, we're going to wrap things up today. Thank you very much for watching Looking Up, A View from the Valley, as we talk about the history of Derby and beyond. And thank you, Julia Baldini. We appreciate you having us here today and telling us a little about what you've done and what you plan to do in the future.
Oh, thank you so much for stopping by.
This has been terrific. And we also want to thank Elaine Brandon and Christine Boulay for their help. And thank you for watching. If you have any comments on the show, feel free to provide feedback, questions, or suggestions to lookingupvalley@gmail.com or check out our Facebook page and dedicated website. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Pam Lorenzo. I'm the chair of the Valley Early Childhood Task Force. And for those of you who are wondering about kindergarten registration for the following towns will take place in January of 2012. In Ansonia, it will be at the Resource Fair at Prendergast School on January 21st from 9 to 1 p.m. We do have a snow date of January 28th. In Derby, at all of the elementary schools between the week of January 17th and January 20th. In Seymour, we will also be doing registration at all of the elementary schools from January 10th through January 12th, and also at the Seymour Public Library, January 11th through the 25th, between 5 and 7 p.m. And Shelton, we will do also at all the elementary schools, the week of January 22nd. Remember, kindergarten is the foundation for future learning. Thank you.